A little bit more about the background, what was going on in the debate between the social partners, how the new tool has been accepted, and then he will also have an interactive presentation. So without further ado, I give the floor to Mr. Simon Hilber, and I'm looking forward to the exchange. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So thank you a lot for having me, for giving me the opportunity to be here today. As mentioned before, I will talk to you about our equal pay analysis tool with Logib. Without further ado, I will go into my presentation. So I will give you a brief overview about the labor market situations of men and women in Switzerland before moving into the legal framework, which gives you a short an introduction on why Logib is what it is today. Before going into the details of Logib, I will talk about a brief history of Logib, since you are also in the process of making history and designing a tool yourself, before mentioning some of the challenges we faced, and then show you the different modules, the different tools we developed. In the end, I will talk briefly about some ways Logib might or might not help, or not, might help with the implementation of the EU Transparency Directive. So I hope you can see it. What is the labor market situation in Switzerland between men and women? We have quite a high labor participation force for women with 77%, which is slightly above, or no, which is quite above the OECD average. However, a large part of women in the labor market work part-time. So as you see here, it's more than half of the women, compared to not even 20% of men, work part-time in Switzerland. Also, we have quite a low share of women in managerial position, which unfortunately is pretty much the same all over the world, as far as I know. Regarding the gender pay gap, we have a gender pay gap of roughly 16%. Our statistical or National Statistical Office also do a decomposition in what share of these 16% can be explained by objective factors such as job position, personal qualification, etc. And if we do this decomposition, roughly half of the 16%, so basically 8%, remain unexplained. What is the Swiss legal framework? Our federal constitution states that men and women have the right of equal pay for work of equal value, which is really the pillar on which Logib was also constructed. Furthermore, we have the Gender Equality Act, which prohibits either direct or indirect discrimination of employees on the basis of sex. And in 2020, a revision of the Gender Equality Act came into force, which mandates that all employers with 100 or more employees have to perform an equal pay analysis and let it be revised and verified by an independent body. In the same revision, also the Swiss Confederation, the national government, received the mandate to provide all employers with a standard analysis tool, allowing them to do an equal pay analysis, which basically led the way to make Logib what it is today. Furthermore, in public procurement, we also have since 1996 that all contracts must be awarded only to tenderers who comply with equal pay requirements, a point I will come to in, I think, the next slide. Oh no. So first, a brief introduction of what is Logib. So Logib is this tool which is provided by the Swiss national government. It's free to use on our website, as I will show you next or soon. And it's constituted of 3 modules. Module 1, which is suitable for medium-sized and larger employers. Module 2, which can be used by any employer with at least 1 man and 1 woman employed. And our newest edition is Logib Pay System, which helps employers to create a pay system based on gender-neutral and objective factors. The different modules rely on different methodologies. So Logib Module 1 is on a statistical multiple linear regression, Module 2 and Pay System on an analytical job evaluation. I will go into further detail later on. Both Module 1 and Module 2, so the equal pay analysis modules, have been recognized as being scientifically sound and conforming to legal requirements, and all three of our modules have been certified as a good practice by the Equal Pay International Coalition, EPIC, which is a coalition of the UN Women, the International Labour Organization, and OECD. So now about how did Logib become what it is today. It all started in 1996 when the Public Procurement Act was revised, and for the first time it stated that people receiving firms receiving public contracts should align with equal pay requirements. One question which arose was, well, basically how can we measure that? Because back in the day, in some court rulings, there had been expert opinion which looked at equal pay within firms, but there was no public available tool. If you wanted to make an equal pay analysis for a firm, you had to bring in an external expert, which would be extremely costly and also take up a lot of time to get this result. So the Federal Office for Gender Equality mandated the creation of this tool. It was presented to the public in 2004, and then in 2006, or since 2006, we have been doing checks of public procurement firms, whether or not they were upholding equal pay. In 2014, the Federal Office started then the development of Logib Module 2, because until then, the Excel tool we had using statistical methods was only able to do an analysis for larger employers, or at least 50 employees. And then we also wanted to have a tool to be able to do an analysis for smaller employers. In 2017, the aforementioned GEA revision of the Gender Equality Act was decided by the federal government. They decided that it would be enforced starting in 2020. So then in 2019, we started moving our previous Logib Excel tool. Sorry, forgot to mention that. Previously, Logib was basically an Excel file using macros, which firms could download on our webpage. It was found that if a large share of firms had to use the tool, this would not be an ideal way to go forward, especially that now more and more macros are used less and less and are even blocked by a large part of IT security. So we developed this Logib web tool as it is today. Then we launched in 2020 for the revision of the Gender Equality Act. We launched Logib Module 1, moving on with Logib Module 2 in 2021 and Logib Pay System in 2023. So what were the challenges we were facing during this development? And one of the biggest challenges was really to measure what is work of equal value. I hope I will be able to persuade you that the way we went is actually an easy, approachable way, and that we did some good work. And if not, well, I hope you get at least some pointers for your work. Then another one was also the definition of what constitutes wage with respect to equal salary, to equal pay. This was actually the first step we took in 2019, was to take ourselves aback and to have to think, well, now that a large part of employers will have to do it in the analysis, which wage components do they need to include and not include in the analysis, we mandated a legal opinion which found that we had to take a large encompassing view of wage for the analysis. One point being, for example, that having time off also constitutes a certain part of wage. If one group gets more holidays than another one, this might be a potential source of discrimination. Another one was with a large part of allowances. So if you get allowances for night pay or not, there can be potential sources of discrimination, especially that because of gender biases, different kind of works often get different remuneration and remuneration styles. Also that employers can choose how they pay their employees. They might pay allowances to a certain group, but in another group they just might include these allowances in the pay wage. In the end, through this legal mandate, we identified that in order to do an equal pay analysis, the wage definition had to be rather broad. Then later on, also what we have to take into account were direct and indirect discrimination, very short description. So direct discrimination is basically what we all think about when we talk about gender discrimination. It's basically a man, a woman who do the same job but get paid differently, and it's pretty straightforward. A harder point is the point of indirect discrimination, which, as I showed you before, is also stated in our laws that it's prohibited, and it's when a priori objective factor puts one group of people in a disproportionate disadvantage. I have two very good examples. So one of them would be if an employer decides to pay lower hourly wage to an employee. And as I mentioned before, in Switzerland, a large majority of part-time employees are women. So just by doing so, they would put women indirectly into a worse position. A second very nice example we like to mention is that one of our cantons, so sub-federal levels, they had to go to court because the nursing staff was complaining or just accused them in front of the courts that they were discriminated. The nursing staff was able to show that basically their work and police work was of equal value. They both had a large responsibility for human life. They had very irregular working hours, night shifts, etc. So they were able to show that their work was of equal value, but back in the day, their salaries were different. So the nursing staff, and because a large majority of nursing staff are women and a large majority of police work are men, they were able to show that in the end, it came down to indirect discrimination. So, it doesn't really fit into this presentation, but it's really one topic we work on every day, and I really like to do some sensibilization work on this. So sorry for this short excursus. Lastly, we also did a questioning of firms, and there we saw that data security was really important for Swiss employers, because in order to do an equal pay analysis, you have to give away a lot of very sensible data. So this was also one of the aspects we had to take into account. We did that by basically creating Logib as the web tool as it is today, where the data does almost not leave the employer's site. So the whole analysis is done in the user's web browser. At one point, data has to be sent to our servers, which are hosted by the Swiss government, by our Federal Office for Information Technology, and they're sent back and forth encrypted. There's no way that we, as the Swiss government, can go and see what wage data was sent, which was also very important because Logib for a long time was also a sensibilization tool, and employers had to be sure that they would not get knocked at their door if their result were bad. So for us, it was also just to have possibility for the employers to know what their situation was. It seems that our work was appreciated. There was an intermediate evaluation of the Equality Act revision, which just came out a month ago, and there it showed that 85% of employers who had to do an equal pay analysis used Logip to do so. It was not mandated to use our web tool. So now I will go into the individual modules, and as a first step is basically, well, how did we implement the work of equal value in our web tool? I will start by Logip Module 2, where we use an analytical job evaluation. We do so by basically taking every job function within a firm and to evaluate them based on 6 requirements. The first one being, what is the level of education and training typically required to perform these tasks? And then 4 other ones which are rather comparative within the different functions within a firm. So it's how independent can work be done, how much further expertise and specific methodological skills do you need, how high is the responsibility related to a task, how is the psychological and the social requirements and demands of a job. It might be psychological, might be do you have to work under a lot of pressure, or social requirements is how much do you have to communicate day to day, how well do you have to make your point, and interpersonal skills. Lastly, it's physical requirements, which are on one hand bearing heavy loads, on the other one it's also just to have repetitive tasks where we know that there's a certain level of wear and tear that goes within them. Short side note, all these 6 factors, they were developed with the help of the University of Bern back in Switzerland, but they also adhere, if we can argue that they adhere to the ILO guidelines for neutral job evaluation, where they say that you need qualification, efforts, responsibility, and work condition to analyze the value of work, the 4 factors which are actually also in the EU directive. Oh, now I switched. So how does this look in practice, this function evaluation? This is a brief view from our newest tool, Logip Pay System, which is based on the same evaluation of function as in Logip Module 2. And basically what you do, you have these different job functions, maintenance up to general management. For the first part, education and training, it's an anchored criterion. So there you take into account, well, what special education do you need, or what type of education do you typically need? And the other 5 factors are only comparable to your given functions. So for example, you say, well, what's the level of responsibility someone from the maintenance staff has? Well, they have the lowest responsibility. What's the level of responsibility general management has? Well, they have the highest level of responsibility. And then in between, you go and see, well, does my administrative staff have higher responsibility than maintenance? If yes, you put them higher, and then you go and look at the technician. Well, they're once higher than administrator. And so you do this function evaluation on all these 6 aspects, and in the end, you receive, I don't know if you see it, it's rather small, but you get a function value. So all these evaluation is transformed into one a score. In our methodology, it ranges from 1 to 50, from 10 to 50, and it's an ordinal measure. So if you have a score of 40, it does not mean that it's twice as valuable as a job with a function of 20, but it just means that it's that this point is less valuable. The work of this point is less valuable than the one of this point, and it's less valuable than the one of that point. In the analysis, we take this value of work into account together with personal characteristics, such as the potential professional experience, years of service, and the employee's education level. So how does the analysis work? what we do is that we try to identify pairs of risks in the firm. We do so by, on one hand, creating this expected wage rank, which is based on the value of work and personal characteristics, and then we compare it to the actual wage paid. And if someone from the opposite sex, who is supposed to earn less, earns more, they are identified as a risk pair. We do this for every employee. We look, is there someone who is supposed, according to their value of work and professional and personal characteristics, is supposed to earn less but earn more? If they do, they are flagged. And in a second step, we then take all these risk pairs to the disadvantage of women and all the risk pairs to the disadvantage of men, take the average. I'll just show you the next picture. I hope it's more comprehensible. So if you have 11 pairs of risks to the disadvantage of women who on average earn 20% less than their male counterparts, and only 2 men who earn less than female counterparts with 6.7% on average, we would say in this situation there's a high risk that you are not conforming to equal pay requirements. So how does this look in practice? Now I would like to give you a brief live presentation of the tool. I hope it's going to work. Great. So if you go to this URL, you get to the entry page. You can go to equal pay analysis. This is something because I was here before. In this example, I'm going to show you Logit Module 2. So what you basically do is you download a Excel sheet, and this is a reminder from our tool as it was in Excel form. This is basically how we put the data into Logib. We do it by an Excel file. All you need is information on the people, so a personal identifier, a variable for their age, a variable for their gender, the years of service, so how long have they been in your firm, and what is their education and training. It's a variable from 1 to 8. You have to go and check the manual to be able to code it. Then what is their job function? What is their activity rates? Are they full-time employee or part-time? How much part-time? They can also be hourly employees. How many hours did they work in the last month? And then you have different wage components. So basic wage, allowances, 13th monthly wage, and special payments, which can be bonuses or other irregular payments. This typically is one of the steps that takes up the most time, just to gather the data and to put it into the right form. But once you have done that, you can, I already put the file in for the sake of showing you, but you just import the file. You have some additional information. I will talk about them when I present Logit Module 1. Then you see a brief overview of your data. Here we have also some automated tests to show that data quality is okay. Now, because it's an example file, I did not put in any mistakes, but if you have someone who is 52 years old and has been working in your firm for 60 years, they will be flagged as not possible. We have found that having as many automated tests in your data helps to improve data quality. If firms do the exercise unsupervised, it really helps to give them as many helps as possible. Then for Logit Module 2, you go in this function evaluation where you do step by step for each of these 6 aspects. You look at what are the functions and how are, for example, here the autonomy of the administration, cleaning, etc. This was already done. If you do it for the first time, you have to do it. It takes a lot of time. And we also suggest, coming back, that there's not only one person who does it alone. Typically, within a firm, it would be multiple people who work on it to have a certain objectivity to the function evaluation. I'm a bit short on time, but I really like this story. We do checks, equal pay checks in public procurement procedures, and we often see that HR functions are quite highly rated. Why is it so? It's because usually a HR person does the function evaluation by themselves, and then they evaluate their function as quite hard and other functions as less hard. So that's why we always say, well, take at least 2-3 people from different parts of the firm to try and validate this analysis. Once you do so, you can put in some information about your company. This is not information that's going to be sent to the Swiss government. It's just so that automated forms that are generated by Logib will have your firm's information on it. Once you did so, you can click on conducting the analysis. I hope it works because I already did it once, and I didn't delete the data. No, everything fine. Once you did so, you get one easy score. This is the total score of your firm. It might go to one side, again, to the disadvantage of women, one side to the disadvantage of men. And in our case, we defined that if the value is of 5 or above, you will not meet the equal pay requirements. In Logib Module 2, we then have further information on how does it look on the individual job functions. So is there one job function which generates a lot of pairs of risk? And also we can go into the personal level and see which are the pairs of risk where you can go and try to identify which person earns less than they should, and is there maybe something else behind it that was not shown by Logib. So now we could go back to the presentation, please. Thank you. Should I go myself or? So I can basically move. Oh yeah, great. Yeah, that's the next slide. So here, what I did not or only briefly mention was what type of data we had, and also you might ask yourself, well, how hard is the effort? How much time does it take to do such an analysis? If you go to the lowest line, you'll see that for Logib Module 2, typically there's about between half a day and 1 working day of preparing the data, do the analysis to get the result I showed you. For Module 1, for large employers, we count between 2 and 8 business working days or days of work, and it's just basically to gather all the data you have and to put it into the Excel file, as I showed you before.
For one person. Typically, this is for one person that is the data in our.
Yeah, it's just like it's 2 people working for 4 days. Like 8 days is really multinational, 10,000 plus employees. An employer with 100 or 200 employees, we say they would have about 2 days of work. So what is the data that is needed? It is basically what I showed you before. For Module 2, it's gender, education, age, years of service, then these 6 factors, as well as the activity rate. What? Oh, sorry. It should have been 1 slide above. What is it for Module 1? Well, it's basically the same information, except that the 2 job function related variables are different. Also, why do we need or why do we use this information? It is because this is also information that has to be provided to the Swiss Statistical Office by the employers, and these factors have been identified as being objective and gender neutral. But see, gender neutral and have an objective effect on wage. That's why they're in there. And the next one is, so the only difference between data you need to provide for module 1 and module 2 are the job function related variables. And now I'm going to show you how we do this in Logib module 1. So module 1, which is used by larger employers, they have two variables which basically determine the value of their work. These is, for one hand, the level of requirements on 8 levels, and it's a measure that measures how much knowledge, skills, and qualifications are needed to perform these tasks. We have recently increased the level from 4 to 8, and since then you can also take into account some very difficult work conditions where you can also adapt this in the level of requirement, or also psychosocial aspects. The second one is a professional position, which typically is a measure on how much responsibility does someone have within the firm. It's typically a hierarchical variable, but it can also have some financial aspects. If, let's say, you're a trader and you trade with 2 billion of assets every day, but you have no subordinates, you could also reflect this in this variable. Also, responsibility for human life. Sounds difficult like this, but I hope this matrix helps you to understand it better. So how do we measure work of equal value in Logib module 1? We basically define this grid, and we say that any function who ends up in the same square can be seen as being of work of equal value. You'll have the slides later on if you wish to have it. So how does the analysis work in Logib? It is based, as I mentioned previously, on a statistical multiple linear regression. And because of the statistics, it can also just be used by firms with more employees. If you have not enough employees, the statistical analysis does not yield results which can be analyzed in a sufficient way. So how does our model look like? We have, on one hand, we have the standardized full-time wage. So how much would someone earn if they worked full-time and if everyone in their firm worked the same number of hours? You could also just use a standardized hourly wage. We use a standardized monthly wage because monthly wages is really something we use a lot in Switzerland. It also has the different parts of the different parts of wages, so base salary, allowances. It's all crammed together in one standardized wage. On the other side, we have personal characteristics, so the highest level of education of one person, of each employee, how many years they have been in the firm, and their potential work experience. These are the personal characteristics. Then the job function characteristics are the two I mentioned before. And in the end, we have a variable of gender. And the interpretation of the results, I hope this helps to show it better to you. So what we look at is basically, well, what's the average wage of men? What's the average wage of women? Typically, it looks like this. It might also look the other way around. Then we take into account, well, how much of this difference can be explained by personal qualification, how much can be explained by the value of work, and whatever remains, which can then basically just be accorded to gender in our model, is what we call this potential wage discrimination. And now I think I'm going to show you how Module 1 works. Thank you. So here again, if this time we choose Logib Module 1, again you have some entry. The data file, I can show it to you. It looks pretty much the same. It is actually the same data file, just that this time you have to fill out the level of requirements and the professional position beforehand. You could also code it in the tool, but it's usually easier. If you import the Excel sheet, you have to fill in some additional information. Shoot, excuse me. Could you please type in 40? 40? Thank you. I thought I didn't have to insert anything. Then you have some information on how your data was coded. You can put in age in years, or you can put in the birth date or the birth year. Same goes for the years of service. Here, once again, you have your data sheet where you can validate the data. You could also make changes if you wish to do so. And we have this overview of the functions. So here, basically, functions which end up in the same square can be seen as being of work of equal value. We have some additional, it's not relevant for the analysis, but it's good for sensibilization. We have some highlights, depending if you have a high gender imbalance in certain squares. It's just also to show the employer, well, here you only have women, you only have men. If there's a square which is only women and one square next to it only men, it might be some incentive to maybe think again about the coding of your functions. One thing I did not mention yet is that, as I said before, the data always is kept with the employer, so with the user. If you want to do to save the data that you have, if you did some changes, you can go here on download export sheet. You have the link pretty much on every page in the analysis and also after the results. It downloads an Excel page, which then you can re-enter into the system at any time and do the analysis again. And if you do not download it, if you close the window, the data is lost. Here, once again, you can put in some company information. In the end, there's this legal disclaimer I did not mention before. I still have time to do so. The legal disclaimer was very important to our lawyers. It says that LOGIP gives you an analysis of a company-wide risk or compliance to equal pay. If LOGIP does not find any company-wide problem, this does not mean that there might not be individuals or certain functions within your firm that are still discriminated. Very important point for lawyers. So here, once you get to the analysis, you get, once again, this number. This time, it's the 2.6% is the wage difference between men and women once all the personal and job function related variables have been taken into account. For Switzerland, we have a threshold, a limit value at 5%. If you go over these 5%, the analysis it will deem to be non-compliant with equal pay requirements. And since 2 years ago, we also have the target value, which is non-mandatory, but it helps to push people towards zero. So this is basically LOGIP. You can download some additional information. Here is one that's important for users in public procurement proceedings. This one is basically a form they can submit with their public procurement application. And it gives then the state like a proof that they're upholding equal pay. And now, with respect to the EU Transparency Directive, we also have a large amount of information within the cockpit. It was not created for the EU directive, but here we have quite a lot of information, since in order to do the equal pay analysis, typically you have to give a lot of data away, and we also work with it and try to give an added value to the employers to here have some information, so you can see how many women are paid on an hourly base or on monthly based. I'm not sure anymore if it's also full-time, part-time. And you have, for example, here, you have basically the wage differences within the squares of men and women, not corrected for any objective variables, but just the raw wage differences, which is, as far as I understood, also part of the EU, the directive requirements. Thank you. We can go back to the slides. So, yes, this was basically the Logip tool. We can go into it further if you have questions later on. But now I want to move on to so how can Logip and the EU directive work together, or what is already in Logip with regards to the EU directive? I put the Article 9 here. So a lot of the numbers which need to be reported are available in Logip or would be able to be added rather easily. In Logip, one part which we think about currently is to make one page which could help Swiss firms with their reporting in the EU to put all these numbers in a simple and in a simple overview. One other part is this Article 4 that states that the member states have to provide tools and methodologies and to make them available to the employers in order to assess work of equal value. I hope I was able to convince you that we did I hope I was able to convince you that we did a good job doing it. I definitely think so, but I hope also that what I showed you gives you some pointers where you can go from here. As I mentioned before, the skills, effort, responsibility, and working conditions, I think, can be mentioned or are used in the evaluation of functions. I don't have time to go into it now, but we have this Logip pay system, which basically is built on the methodology of Logip Module 2. It's the same evaluation of functions, and it then provides you also with a nice overview of your job functions and what their value of work are. And it gives some pointers and an example how a gender-neutral pay system could look like in a firm. So with that, I thank you, and yeah, I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Simon, very much. As usual, Swiss are very orderly and logical, so also the name reflects logic. So I'm giving the floor to anyone who has some questions, and I think that we should have them, so please raise your flags and I will give you the word. Yes, Lan, please.
Hi. So thank you for the presentation. We should say that we've looked at Logip and used it as an example when thinking about designing the tool for Slovenia as well. So maybe you could just elaborate a bit more about the input data. So do you have any feedback from the companies about how they're compiling it? Do you know if there are any issues about consistency in how what they take into account when computing the wages? And then maybe just a second question, you mentioned that you were sending some encrypted data. Have you thought about just computing everything on the client side, or what's the reason for sending the data at all?
I just need to go a pen and paper. Excuse me. So your first question, so the second one was about encrypting, yes, and the first one was
about the input data.
Input data, yeah.
How companies are computing
yes.
it by hand, or do they have any exports from the software they're using for?
So yes, there are ERP, our enterprise resource systems. So like the biggest one is, great, forgot his name. But there are some like enterprise resource systems in Switzerland which provide an automated login button where they can get such a file. But it's not. It was not a collaboration with us, so they did it by themselves. We were working on a possibility to basically send the data directly from the enterprise systems to our servers, but it had to be abandoned due to there was a technical incompatibility which we did not see coming, and then within the given time and budget we were not able to implement it. But it's still something that's out there. If we had further funding, we would maybe implement it. But there has been this thought of sending the information directly from their automated systems. One challenge we have there, of course, are the different wage components. So we have a very extensive definition of what goes in there and what does not. But it is often still on a case-to-case basis. So there are certain wage components which definitely have to be included, some which do not have to be included. We have a very extensive list of it. And then there are some which then really depend on when do they need to be put in. Is there a written agreement on how these wage components work, and are they non-discriminatory? And this is something that the firms then have to check for themselves and will be checked by the outside auditors if they have to do an equal pay analysis for our Gender Equality Act. So it's the wage component was quite a point, and therefore it is important to know that it is good to have a good definition, but there are often special cases. And it was hard for us to formulate it, but I think we did a good job in doing it. This and the second one is encrypting. Why is data sent to the Swiss government servers? Our data analysis, especially the statistical analysis, is done with a programming language called R, which really facilitates data estimations, statistical estimations. To do everything in the web browser, I think it would be quite hard, depending also on the different types of analysis you do. So I showed you the cockpit. There are some further analysis, further models, which are also computed. And these would be very hard to do in, I don't know what the typical web browser language is, but usually it's not suited to do statistical analysis. Yes.
I might. Yeah, please, Alexandra, do.
Thank you for your presentation. A practical question. You said, if I understood it right, the analysis of the equal job, equal value of work is done at the level of company. So is it possible then that two companies from the same branch could have different evaluation of the equal value of work?
Yeah, this.
Yeah, yeah? That is my question.
Yeah, we do this, or we give the firms have to do an equal pay analysis for the lowest the lowest form of a firm that is on a legal level, the firm. That's from the Swiss legal system. All this pay discrimination can only happen on a contractual basis. So you are discriminating someone if you have a contract with that person and another person who is paid more of the opposite sex. This is the legal point of view that was told us by our lawyers. So if you have two different entities, which are also in a sense of law different entities, if one person in one employer gets paid, let's say if an engineer in one firm gets paid more than an engineer in another firm, and one of them is male, the other female, you cannot say it's discrimination in a legal sense, because the employer could just as well pay men as badly in the firm that people are paid less. So the analysis of function is always done at the firm level, at the level of the employer. If you have different branches which belong to the same employer, they all have to do the same function evaluation.
But actually, the same work done, the same profession, for example, could be evaluated in a different way in different companies that employ the same professionals. For example, I'm a professor, and at my university we can rank professors in a different way than pure researchers, for example. That will be a political debate at my university. And this political debate could be different in another university. So this ranking of work, a ranking of professionals, a ranking of jobs could be different in your case in Switzerland in different universities or different companies or organizations, employers that are providing the same, I don't know, production or services.
So in this case, Logib, as I hopefully said before, is an analysis tool for equal pay within one employer. And therefore, we also allow the employers to do the statistic coding of value of work that fits their employees the best. And there might be, oh no, I don't want to go there. There might be someone called an engineer in one firm and someone called an engineer in another firm, but basically they do not do the same job in the end. One of them might be working in the thunder where he's under a high amount of pressure and has to do calculation in his head, and the other one might be behind a desk in his calm habitat and only uses Excel sheets the whole day. So that's why we give the employers the liberty to evaluate the functions that fit their employees the best and their job functions the best. Of course, ideally there would be really one nationwide or international even job function value for different functions. And for example, for the national statistics, we use it, or they just use job titles as a measure for different jobs. And it fits for a national analysis, but now here it was not well received if we were to ask for it.
I will have a couple of questions. First of all is, does anyone validate the results of the analysis? Is there a check and balance system for these results? Because of course companies are doing it for different reasons. This is not peer or social pressure. It's monetary pressure from the state, because if you want to get the public tenders, you need to have this evaluation in place. That's the first question. Does the state then evaluate these reports, and does it go into the numbers, and does it see because of course you can also, as a company, you can probably leave out some employees that would ruin your data, so you know which ones. So do you know that this data is valid? Are there any penalties if the state or the cantons realize that there has been a manipulation in the data? And then third is, do you think the system also contributes to the lowering of, does it affect gender pay gap in any way? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So for the first question, checks and balances, I think we have to differentiate. There are basically three use cases of using Logib. One is purely for self-interest, like if a firm wants to know, do I have some problems with equal pay? They can use the tool by themselves. And for them it's pure information. Sometimes with really large employers, they say, well, can we not just analyze one group of employees? And we say, as long as it's just for self-test, of course, you can do whatever you want with the tool. Then the second use case is, as I mentioned before, the Gender Equality Act revision, which mandates that all employers with 100 and more employees, public and private, have to do an equal pay analysis. And this analysis has to be validated by an external auditor. And they look that all employees are accounted for and that all data that is entered into Logib is okay. So there we really have a check. For the public procurement procedures, the forms, it depends on which level of the government you give in, you want to apply for a public procurement. For us on the national level, they can basically just fill out a form if they're a larger employer and they had an analysis from the mandated analysis, they have to send in this. If they're a smaller employer, they either just have to swear on their honor that they uphold gender equality, and or they might just give in an analysis as it is, but they might be checked. So we do multiple checks every year in public procurement, and there we have a standardized process. They are accompanied by an external expert, and there we can also make pretty much clear that the analysis is sound. Then on sub-federal levels, there are some of the cantons which asks for the analysis that they hand in to be validated by an external auditor. There are some that also require equal pay analysis for 50 or more employees, and then on the city level there are also differences. So I don't know if you knew, Switzerland is a very federalistic country, so our cantons have a lot of power, and the federal government cannot always interfere in their local practices. And how did Logib affect equal pay or equality in general? What we always say, I think for a long time, and as I mentioned before, firms had to swear on their honor that they upheld gender equality when applying for public procurement. And I think if you ask any employer, do they discriminate willingly their employees? I hopefully 100% of them will say no. But there is always unknowingly discrimination happening, or just situations which happen that lead to discriminatory practices, and often people are not aware, or firms are not aware that they are happening. So just by shedding light on the problem and to give a number and to be able to show people I hope I was able to show you that it's easy to use, you get in quite fast, you get an analysis and the result, just by showing people and firms that there is this possibility and there might be problems within their firm, to make them realize that. I think as a sensibilization tool, it brought a lot of good things.
But it didn't affect the gender pay gap?
There is one study which was made in the 2015s, which showed that as soon when Logib was introduced, or when equal pay analysis in the public procurement was introduced, that it had a positive effect. And now the newest number of the gender pay gap were published this year, or at the end of last year, and we see a drop from previous years. It coincides with the introduction of the Gender Equality Act, but for now we cannot say that it's really, there's no, how do you say? Yeah, we cannot make sure that it's a causal effect. It is good for storytelling, but well, we'll have to see further years. For now, it's really the first year after the introduction, so the data is a bit weak on that side. But there has been an effect, it seems.
Any other questions? Yes, Ruby, please.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have one question that relates a little bit to the use, especially the use of Logip by big companies. And then I have a couple of technical questions that maybe I'll just discuss with you privately because they're not going to be really interesting for most of the audience. So one question would be, if you have really big companies, because you have small companies and big companies, and obviously this is something that can be very beneficial for smaller companies that don't have any type of pay structures, so they can actually play around with that, simulate, model on that. And I'm curious if now this tool is actually used also by the consultants to actually consult small and medium enterprises to walk them through that and then actually come up to the pay structures for these companies. And the second question is about the big companies. So let's take Novartis or one really large multinational company that obviously has a really well-developed pay structure that they already use. So you kind of, and please don't get me wrong, so you kind of enforce them to get from their structure into this two-dimensional profession, like the level or responsibility times professional requirements. How do they do that? Do they use some sort of translation? Do they actually use their own ways of how they deal with that? So how do these really big companies that have established things work with Logip in terms of categorization? Thank you.
So maybe coming first to the first questions regarding consultants and use of Logip. So we know of multiple consulting firms, which for also smaller and medium-sized enterprises who do use Logip, sometimes Model 2, sometimes Model 1 in analysis. There is equal pay certification by a private institution who also uses the Logip methodology to give out their or actually there are multiple, now that I think of it, multiple consulting firms who also do certifications using Logip. And then the big companies, first of all, you mentioned that big companies all have a very well-structured pay system. From experience, we know that it's surprising how many don't. Like there are, we are also in close contact with some consulting firms, and some of them told us that they went to really big employers who basically did wage structuring like this. So they were very surprised.
This is HR, you know. You said before they are very subjective. So.
No, but so of course it becomes more and more that very large employers have a well-structured pay system. But I just wanted to say that really not all of them have it. And how do they use it? So to do an analysis regarding for the Gender Equality Act, so the ones that are mandated for employers with 100 employees or more, there it's not mandatory to use Logip, which opens the door for employers who have a well-structured pay system and are often accompanied by consultants to use their equal pay analysis systems. What those systems have to provide is that they have to be scientifically and legally compliant. And the consulting firms have to prove that, have to give documentation that this is the case. But we also have especially in the beginning of the development of the web tool, for example, we had Coca-Cola Switzerland, which also did pay analysis using Logib. So there are quite large employers which can use Logib Module 1 and get good results. One reason I mentioned when I showed you Logib Module 1 that now the skill variable is on 8 levels. We augmented it to 8 levels in the past year, and it was because of returns from really large employers that they were not able to have a really complex system of function and to break it down to the level it is now. We had, okay, there's some technical aspects that go with it, and we can look at it in bilaterally if you want to later on.
More questions? Then I will continue. Was there any political debate when the law was enacted about reporting for the purpose of companies applying for the public tenders? Was there any political or was there any opposition or, I mean, what was the general debate? Because we know Switzerland is quite, we know that women got voting rights in some cantons quite late. We also know that in some cantons women didn't have bank accounts. So, you know, taking this into account, that it's a very traditional society when it comes to roles of women and men, how did the companies take this when it came to gender pay gap evaluation system?
So, of course, there's always a political debate. What the thing is, when the Public Procurement Act was first revised in 1996, it's a bit too early for me to know, and I don't know if back then, I heard from colleagues who have been in the office for a long time, they kind of managed to slip it in there, that unnoticed, and especially back in the day, everyone thought like, yeah, of course we uphold equal pay, and there was no way to check it, and then it wasn't really, it didn't seem to be a question. Now, in the implementation of public procurement, I know in some cantons which have enacted that you have to really provide a slip when starting at 50 employees or more. There has been a political pushback. One canton, I think, wanted to only allow Logib proofs, and I think there it got rejected to have also open market for private consultants. The revision of the Equal Pay Act, of the Gender Equality Act, introducing the mandatory analysis for employers with 100 and more employees, there in the end, what we have now is a compromise. So every employer with 100 employees or more has to do an analysis. They have to have it checked and they have to inform their employees about it, but they do not have to inform the state. That was this compromise which came with it. And also there is a lack of sanctions if you do not uphold it. That was the political compromise which was found. We find it still very important that the law came to be, because just really the sensibilization factors of doing one time, or you're supposed to do it every 4 years if there's a problem, but just to do it once helped a lot of employers to realize what their situation was.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, then thank you very much again for a really, really good presentation. It was... it was worthwhile, really. So thank you for coming here. Okay, now we are finishing this session, and we have about an hour for lunch break. I don't know where lunch will be served. Okay, so we go out to the left, then around the corner and straight on to the new part, and there is a dining room, and they will serve us lunch there. So we meet within an hour. Thank you.